Hi guys, welcome to the Church Split. My name is Will, and today we are talking about Cameron Bertuzzi at Capturing Christianity, who just put out a video saying that the miracle claims of the Catholic Church actually debunk Protestant apologetics. And we're going to talk about why I think he's mistaken in this video. In addition to that, I am going to give you a filter on how that you could put all miracle claims through and know whether or not you have a good reason to take that miracle claim seriously. But in order to know what that is, you do have to stick around through this video because I will be giving it throughout. Now, some background information. I actually used to be a supporter of Cameron Bertuzzi's channel at Capturing Christianity. I used to actually literally pay money every single month, and I was a monthly supporter back in the early days of Capturing Christianity. And in my channel's infancy, I actually had him on for an interview, which was awesome. Now, here's the thing, is I always supported Cameron because he pretty much talked about intellectual reasons to believe in Christianity, and all Christians from every sect could kind of come together and cheer him on. Now, 2 years ago or so, he converted to Roman Catholicism. However, I don't hate Catholics, and I actually look at them as brothers and sisters in Christ, despite our differences. However, recently, he has shifted his content and is now, for lack of a better term, evangelizing for the Catholic Church and now attacking Protestantism. And which is all well and good, but that does mean that we do respond. We will respond. I know we will have to respond. And I always say I am a begrudging Protestant because I actually don't fit into a lot of doctrinal areas that most mainstream Protestants fit into. Plus, I really do like the high church feel and vibe, despite me working at like a hipster evangelical church. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up the video and see what he has to say regarding these miracle claims and how he thinks they actually debunk Protestant apologetics. Let's roll.
Alex O'Connor just exposed a massive, and I mean massive, problem for Protestant apologetics, and even William Lane Craig doesn't seem to have a good answer to this. It's about the group appearances, like the 500 witnesses in 1 Corinthians 15. Christians love pointing to these as powerful evidence for the resurrection, and there's good reason to do that, right? It's like the more witnesses that you have, the better the evidence. But here's the issue. If group appearances prove the resurrection, what do you do with Marian apparitions like Fatima or Zaitun? Tens of thousands, sometimes millions of people witness these events, including skeptics, including journalists, and including non-Christians. Are Protestants actually ready to accept these miracles, or is this the double standard that finally breaks their theology entirely? In this video, we're going to find out. So Alex O'Connor recently highlighted this inconsistency. And as I say, William Lane Craig doesn't seem to really have a good answer to this. It's honestly surprising. But let's first hear from Alex.
Remember, sometimes groups do claim to see visions, such as various apparitions of Mary, or the Roman Emperor Constantine's vision of a cross of light in the sky, which may have been seen by his whole army as well. The source isn't clear. Look at this image. This is a picture of a crowd in Fatima, Portugal in 1917. This crowd, many more than 500 in number, were witness to the so-called miracle of the sun. A prophecy by 3 shepherd children said that the Virgin Mary would perform a miracle on the 13th of October, causing this large crowd to gather on that day. And the miracle happened. Testimonies from the members in the crowd were published in the newspaper. They claimed to have seen the sun dancing in the sky, zigzagging around, and even advancing towards the earth, all for 10 minutes. So a large crowd witnessing a prophesied miracle, and we actually know who saw it and precisely what they saw. We even have their direct testimony. Does Wes Huff believe in this Catholic miracle? Do you? And if not, why not?
Exactly. Today, we're diving into Alex's argument, Craig's response, and then why Protestants desperately need to come up with some kind of response to this argument. In the clip that we just watched, Alex raises a very interesting point. If group appearances like the 500 in 1 Corinthians 15 are good evidence for the resurrection, what about other documented group visions like Fatima? Let's actually talk about Fatima. So, fascinating story. In 1917, over 70,000 people gathered in Fatima, Portugal, after 3 children claimed that the Virgin Mary would perform a miracle at a specific time on a specific day. Among the crowd were skeptics, journalists, and people of all beliefs. The question is, what happened next? On the day the children predicted, witnesses reported the sun dancing in the sky, a phenomenon so extraordinary that even secular newspaper covered it the next day. It's one of the craziest stories you're ever going to read. And this wasn't just like 1 or 2 people, it was tens of thousands. Many of them were skeptics. Many described something they believed could only be supernatural. Add the prediction by the children that Mary would perform a miracle on that day, and you've got phenomena that can't be easily dismissed as like a fluke of nature. But Fatima isn't even the most impressive example. Between 1968 and 1971, millions of people in Zaitun, Egypt, mostly Muslims, reported seeing a woman-like illuminated figure above a Coptic church. The witnesses, both Muslim and Christians, immediately recognized the image as Mary. These apparitions weren't fleeting. They happened repeatedly, were photographed, investigated by secular religious authorities, and even broadcast live. If you're looking for a group appearance, this is definitely it. But here's the question. If group appearances are good evidence for the resurrection, aren't they even better evidence for Marian miracles?
Okay, so what we have right here is Cameron basically saying that because there's these Marian miracles with all these other witnesses, then shouldn't the same standard apply to the resurrection case? Now, actually, on his face, I actually don't have much of a problem with this particular argument, but there are some issues that we will discuss going on. And again, I do have a filter for you on how you can know whether or not you should take a miracle claim seriously. However, I first think it's important that we take a look at Dr. William Lane Craig's response, because it seems to be that this response in particular is what Cameron really disagrees with.
I'm really curious your take. How do we respond to group visions of the Virgin Mary?
I think here Alex is drawing our attention to a very important point, namely the antecedent beliefs of persons which would dispose those persons towards certain experiences. Like Alex, I am skeptical of the Marian mass appearances. The person who experiences Marian visions are typically Roman Catholics predisposed toward belief in the Virgin Mary. And so for exactly the same reason, I wouldn't lay too much emphasis on the appearance to the 500 brethren, who were probably all Christians. It's interesting that Paul refers to them as brethren, 500 brethren. So these people were probably already Christian believers and therefore predisposed to believe in Jesus' resurrection. And so I wouldn't lay too much emphasis on this. As you said, Sean, it's a piece in the puzzle. It's part of the cumulative case.
Dr. Craig's response here, as much as I love him to death. Let's just say that his response here is less than satisfying. All right. He suggests that Marian miracles like Fatima aren't credible because the witnesses were predisposed to believe in the Virgin Mary. But this explanation falls apart for at least two reasons. I've already kind of mentioned one of them. So first, not everyone at Fatima was predisposed to believe. Among the 70,000 were skeptics, journalists, and even atheists. These people weren't exactly looking for a miracle, yet they all reported seeing similar extraordinary phenomena. And second, predisposition doesn't explain Zaytun at all. In Zaytun, thousands of Muslims, people with no cultural or theological predisposition to Marian apparitions, reported seeing the Virgin Mary appear above a Coptic church. What's crazy is that the first two witnesses of the apparition were Muslims. Like, these appearances were documented with photos, eyewitness testimonies, and even live broadcasts. In fact, at one point, the secular authorities cut the power in the area surrounding the church, and yet the appearances kept occurring. So if Fatima included skeptics and Zaytun involved tens of thousands of Muslims, Dr. Craig's response here actually collapses completely. These appearances.
So he claims that this means that Dr. Craig's response falls apart completely. However, there's a few things to mention about this. One, William Lane Craig did say that those who see these Marian appearances tend to be Roman Catholic, not always. The other thing is that, yes, the predisposition would be the cultural milieu, which means that if even if you have skeptics there, atheists, and others who are witnessing this event, if cultural milieu happens to accept Catholicism as general Christianity, and therefore they all were probably raised in Catholic homes or around Catholic friends and family, then it would make sense that they actually would still be looking for possibly a Marian appearance of some sort, because they're looking for a verification on whether or not only is the miracle true, but whether or not the Catholic faith is true as a whole or whatever. So that cultural milieu would be in the backdrop of someone like a skeptic in mind. Now, as far as when it comes to the Muslim case, I think Cameron's point stands a little bit better there. However, the other thing to consider here is the fact that even Muslims, even though they might not be Catholics who respond to Mary necessarily, they do have a predisposition to accepting the supernatural or the spiritual world as a whole. So there is some things to accept there. But however, I don't think William Lane Craig's position actually does the best work that Protestants in these situations. Will from the future here, guys. I forgot to mention one little thing when it comes to Alex O'Connor here. So I think Cameron, of course, is a little mistaken here on the way he thinks that Protestants can engage with Marian miracles. But Alex, however, is another ballgame, because Alex is saying essentially like, oh, this is an inconsistency in Christianity, therefore Christianity is untrue, I guess. Okay. Or if he thinks that Protestants are being inconsistent, which I don't think we have to be, and I don't think we are. But even if, okay, sure, maybe some Protestants are inconsistent on those miracle claims, wouldn't this just show the fact that Protestants are inconsistent and then just make him go, but the Catholic Church has a lot of evidence for it, especially if, as Alex says, so many people witness this and believe it themselves. Alex has claimed in the past to be a non-resistant non-believer, but I think this is untrue. I think he actually is a resistant believer, and he actually just doesn't want to believe in Christianity at this point. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's brilliant, but that's the reality here in my book, because there's a lot of evidences for Christianity. And if he thinks that Protestant answers aren't good enough, which again, I don't agree with, but if he doesn't think that, then that's perfectly fine, because that just means he should become a Catholic instead. So either way, atheism is not true. And I just quickly wanted to say that. Now, back to the rest of the video. One, we need to ask ourselves a question: that could it ever be rational to believe in miracles in the first place? This one needs to be the first thing Christians start on. And obviously, this here is the bread and butter of our entire case for the resurrection. If you believe miracles can happen, then the resurrection can happen, right? So, and just so you guys know, this material on miracles is not original to myself. This is from Dr. Tim McGrew, who does a phenomenal job at defending the case for miracles, but also being a proper miracle skeptic by using a proper filter. And we're gonna go through that here as we go. So there's 3 words that really need to be defined according to Dr. McGrew, which is, in this case, we need to define could, rational, and miracle in this very particular statement. A miracle is an event that would not have happened if the natural world were left to itself. So we need to understand that first. So if that's the case, a miracle is the event that if the natural world was never touched, it would not have taken place. And then rational would be to follow the evidence wherever it leads, right? So depending on what the evidence shows might mean that we have to shift our belief on this. And the idea of could is to deny this. In other words, to deny that miracles could never be rational is to believe in something like David Hume, that where he believes that miracles could never be rational in the first place, which really puts you in a kind of in a cudgeled position, pretty drastically, right? To say that miracles that are logically impossible, they could never happen. When we come into science itself, because a lot of people appeal to science that because someone like O'Connor is trying to basically say that we should be skeptical of all miracles and not affirm any of them. So first things first, we need to see if they're even logically possible. Yes, they are logically possible. There's nothing logically impossible. In other words, I'm not asking for a square circle when I say that a miracle took place. I'm just saying that the natural world, if left to itself, would continue on normally, but a miracle would be something that goes against that natural tendency, that natural way of working. And is it rational to believe that? Well, it is if the evidence points to that miracle actually taking place. However, everyone to some degree has to believe in something that is relatively miraculous, whether you believe in a self-sustaining universe, self-causing universe, or self-eternal universe if you're an atheist. Those are all kind of miraculous and all kind of in some way, shape, or form deny as what we know how reality works, unless something tampered with it. Science, though, again, only tells us what nature does when it is left to itself. Science only tells us what nature will do if left to itself, but science does not tell us whether or not nature is left to itself. It's important that we understand the limitations of the scientific system. If the system is not left to itself, it means miracles can happen. So if we believe that there's other methods, other ways, and not methods, if there's other ways of reality besides just the physical, then we have to acknowledge that it is possible for miracles to exist. Now, a miracle would be impossible to recognize as well, unless there was something on which to backdrop it. A miracle would be impossible to know if we did not have a consistent universe. So the consistent universe aspect is important to the claim on miracles, because again, without miracles, without a consistent backdrop, we would never be able to even identify a miracle that happened, right? If every time I went to drive off the curb suddenly transformed into a rubber wall to bounce me back, that's not a consistent universe. I cannot interact with that in a consistent way. And that means every single time, that doesn't really seem like a miracle when it takes place. But we need to have consistent laws in order for miracles to stand out. Here's the other reality. Thousands of miracle claims exist in world history across all religions and across many, many decades and many, many centuries, which makes it increasingly difficult because how can you trust a single miracle claim at all? Right? Because if every religion claims to have miracles and they're all throughout history, yet all the religions disagree with each other, how can you even start trusting miracles at all? But the problem is, this is also those who are just skeptics outright to say that it's impossible for it to happen, like David Hume, are really making some leaps to get there, because it's kind of throwing the proverbial baby out with the bathwater that, okay, well, because some of these are skeptical, they all must be skeptical. But that's not necessarily true. Let's go ahead and get into a filter here for miracles. And this is something that Cameron needs to understand when it comes to Protestants. This is not a thing that destroys our apologetics. Actually, quite the contrary, it's another thing that we use. Okay, so we can use miracle claims still. The first thing is that you need to understand you are trying to figure out whether or not a miracle claim is true, is whether or not it is a distant event. In other words, if it takes place too far away from the reporter, then it's doubtful, right? So if I'm saying that here where I'm at in America, I witnessed this miracle. There's this miracle that took place over in Nepal. You'd be like, how would you even know that? I'm like, well, my buddy told me. Okay, but that's not really reliable. So if the event is distant geographically, it is likely to be doubted, right? The other one is opinions already established. If the miracle claim supports or affirms established opinions and prejudices. And this is kind of what William Lane Craig was getting at, is that if it's already affirming that which everyone already believes, or the cultural milieu, or that which is more regularly accepted at the time, then there is reason to doubt that it even took place in the first place. Then finally, also, we have uncertain events, which could it be explained in some other way through natural events? Because some of these miracle claims can be replicated. And then you can see that it is actually not, in fact, a miracle. Because, by the way, Christians, though we believe miracles can take place, doesn't mean that we should believe every miracle that is ever claimed, right? That gets absurd very quickly. So we should know whether or not it is easily replicated behind closed doors. The other one is belated reports. When the first report comes long after the event, in other words, within cultural norms as well, because some people look at the gospel claims that they're written too far after. Well, within the timeline of their lives, it's actually not, and within the cultural events themselves, it's actually not that far out. 40, 50 years in the first century of the claim being written is not actually that big. Plus, we have evidence that those weren't just claims that were made in the Gospels at the time, but we have earlier claims being made as well that the Gospels actually verify. However, that's neither here nor there, because the point is the report belated? Is there a time difference between them? Like if I'm making a claim that a miracle happened, in 1776 during the signing of the Declaration of Independence, some crazy miracle took place. I'm like, I don't think you'd be like, I don't think you would know that. It's pretty far away. Like you weren't alive, right? You'd have reason to doubt. And then the other one to consider is trivial events, unconnected to any significant purpose, making no difference to our lives. In other words, they're just idle tales. So people make these sorts of claims all the time. You hear all sorts of wise tales about trivial events and how miraculous they are. Well, if they're really not affirming anything, then they're not really worth our time, are they? They're just trivial events. They're just little wise tales. That's it. Not really that big of a deal. Now, when miracles took place in Scripture, you'll notice that it was always for a sign. It was always to show that there is something going on with God and people as a sign. So that's important also, that miracles, what is their purpose? So obviously we need a scientific backdrop in order for the miracle to stick out, to show that it's a sign. Because again, as I mentioned before, with like if the curb turned into a rubber wall to bounce me back, well, then I have no way of verifying a sign, right? So the rigidity of our natural world goes in favor of miracles in this sense, because we need a way to actually show whether or not a miracle took place. Okay, so those are some filters there. Whether or not we are geographically distant from the claim, opinions are already established about the claim, and it sounds like to me there's a bunch of people who are really already amped up and ready for these miracle claims to take place, that there is uncertain events that took place that we can't confirm, belated reports, trivial events, things like that. Now let's talk about our positive case. I'm getting ahead of myself. Our positive criteria for knowing if a miracle took place or not. One is that, of course, that it was public. I got ahead of myself. Can you tell? Got ahead of my notes. The one is public. If the event should not be restricted to one witness. I'm looking at you, Joseph Smith, because there's no way to verify. And if God does miracles as a sign to people, then that should be taken into consideration, that there is a public event that takes place to be a sign unto people, and not as a personal revelation from God to be able to go use and abuse and create your own cult. The other one is that what acts took place after the event, right? Things were things set up to memorialize the event. Was there an annual celebration to take place? What happened? What acts were taken once the event took place? Because if they are used as a backdrop of a supernatural sign to people, then there should be responses and actions that take place that follow. Okay, and then also they should be things that can be sensed. The event must be able to be detected with our senses. This is like the whole thing when, we always harass doubting Thomas, but he's not crazy when he's going, but I need to see him with my eyes, right? I can't just go, no, none of this is true. That's why it's important that we defend the gospel validity and the historicity of the gospel claims, because if we don't do that, we lose our historical methodology, right? So we lose our ability to check this out with our senses. And then finally, with the criteria is time. All these things are done at the time that the miracle took place, or within a reasonable amount of time therein. So if something fits in within these four things of being public, of having acts that follow, that can be interacted with the senses, and proper amount of time, if those things take place, then you probably have a pretty good reason to start believing that that miracle took place. But there's also reasons to doubt miracles. Now, as far as these Marian miracles are concerned, there's a few responses. One, someone could still say that, well, the opinions were already established, right? I mean, Muslims, they're not Catholic. How would they recognize the Virgin Mary if there wasn't some sort of knowledge of that? Or was it just somebody with wide hysteria saying it, and then everyone just starts affirming it because the thing started looking like Mary? Now, I'm not one for that sort of response, and generally speaking, right, like, I don't think it's useful to just say that people got deceived because you had a couple crazy zealots and everyone just started following because, like, oh my gosh, you're right, and that's everyone gets hyped up in the moment. Possible, but not always likely. The other issue I have with that is just the idea that I don't think it really is that important whether or not someone saw Mary or not, as far as I don't think it destroys Protestantism. Because here's the other thing that Protestants need to realize. You don't have to debunk Marian miracles, like Mary being revealed to people, because guess what? Protestants still believe in the Virgin Mary. We believe Jesus Christ was born of the Virgin Mary, and all generations call her blessed. And God can reveal all sorts of things, whether it's his son through a vision, as we've seen many Muslims talk about, or whether it's through showing his mother to people to show like a divine nurturing aspect, or to welcome them onto the fold as children. Who knows? But the bottom line is, it's not that actually important for Protestants to debunk miracle claims about Mary. It's not. Because, again, we believe that Mary is real as well, just like many people have claimed to encounter angels, and others have encountered demons. Actually, I interviewed somebody on this channel around Halloween who talked about her encounter with evil forces. So who cares? I am more than willing to accept, with all the eyewitness testimony and the timeline and all those things, that sure, people saw something, and it very well could have been the Virgin Mary, but that would only just be God revealing the fact that, hey, I'm real and my son was born of the Virgin Mary. That's all it would prove. It does not get you necessarily to Catholicism. So this is where I think Cameron is being a little bit preemptively striking here, because I know many Protestants who have no issue with somebody having a vision and seeing Mary or Jesus or an angel. All that to say, I think Cameron jumped the shark a little bit here, and he's making a little bit of bodacious of a claim. However, I don't think it's beneficial to be attacking Protestants and Protestant apologetics, trying to undercut the good work that they're doing to bring people into faith, when in general, their methodology is perfectly sound. So, Cameron, there's my answer for you. As a Protestant, I am more than happy to accept Marian miracles, so long as they fit within the filters and criteria that I have presented, because I think that gives us a good epistemic foundation. But otherwise, even if somebody doubts it, I don't think that they're unreasonable to doubt it due to, things like opinions that already existed or other reasons. But that's the filter I like to use. Thank you, Dr. Tim McGrew, for that filter. He's used it in debates and discussed miracles many, many times. And I think he's one of the best people out there defending it. But regardless of the fact, I hope you found this video to be helpful. What do you think about the Marian miracles? Let me know in the comments below. And like always, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Church Split. So take care and God bless.